It sounds simple, the spiritual path of optimism. And we, being science of minders to some degree, at least almost all of us, would believe that the world at the spiritual level is perfect. But the whole universe must be perfect. All of it, because it's all God. So this is my take on the philosophy and psychology of spiritual optimism, which at the end of this, I hope you'll all choose as your spiritual path. Now, optimism is a philosophical word created by a philosopher, Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, who lived 300 years ago. And these are his basic beliefs. He believed that God is the creative intelligence and is sufficient and complete unto itself, and therefore God could only create perfection. Could not create anything that wasn't perfect. So you and I and the chair you sit on and the tree outside the window are perfect. And it's hard to let that in because the whole world is trying to tell you it isn't perfect all the time. Now, if this sounds familiar, everything being perfect, that's because it's a basic tenet of New Thought philosophy. It's a basic idea that Ernest Holmes trotted out for us over and over and over again, that reality must be perfect because it is in the nature of God to create, and it is in the nature of the universe to be created, to be expressed by God in a perfect manner. Now, the dictionary definition of the word is the disposition or tendency to look on the more favorable side of events or conditions and to expect the most favorable outcome. Okay? Now, that's pretty much the definition of an alignment, right? To look for the favorable outcome. The belief that good is ultimately dominant. That the power of the universe is love. There is no opposing power. See, we think that there's something opposing good, but there is not. There is only good and how we experience life. That goodness pervades reality. And I think that's a very important part of a belief system, that goodness is pervasive in reality, and that our mental attitudes and are looking for conditions that we judge not perfect are just that, judgments about conditions. The doctrine that this is the best of all possible worlds. And boy, did he get made fun of for saying that, because nobody believed it was the best of all possible worlds. But if you believe that God could create only perfection, then you must believe that this world right now, right here, exactly as it is the best of all possible worlds. Now, there are several branches of psychology today that have adopted this whole attitude of optimism to use it as therapy. And you might want to look them up. I'm not going to talk about them today. So what is this? What are the mental characteristics of being an optimist? Well, positive anticipation of the future. Do you believe your future is bright? Do you? You see good in your... Optimists say to themselves, things might be not so good right now, but they'll get better tomorrow, right? Or, I might be having a problem right now, but I'll do better in the future. Or, good things happen for core reasons. Now that means kind of like, good things happen to me because my consciousness is in the right place for a good reason. Or, I'm good, as opposed to I'm good at something. I'm good. I am goodness itself made manifest. Permanence. Optimists believe that good events happen due to permanent causes. In other words, I did well because of who I am. Okay? Not, I did well because I got lucky this week. Or the boss yelled at me because he's in a bad mood. All right. If you're a pessimist, you would think the boss yelled at me because I always make mistakes. Be a different kind of thing. Personalities. Okay, so optimism is and can be a learned behavior. I meet a lot of people who think of themselves as optimists, but they haven't made a conscious decision to learn to live all of their life that way. See, that's what I'm asking about today. I'm saying, how about instead of the Via Dolorosa or the path of suffering or bodily harm or the path of devotion, how about the path of optimism as a spiritual path, chosen, buffered, uplifted, utilized consciously, moment to moment. So I'll give you a good reason to become a spiritual optimist. How about this? Optimists tend to be healthier and live longer. Now that's scientific fact. Thousands of psychological studies have proven that people who are optimistic live longer and they're healthier. Big enough benefit? Pretty good benefit. Huh? Optimists are happier with life. Why? Because they don't think anything negative is permanent. Okay, they have less wrinkles and fewer frown lines. I think that's good enough reason to take the whole thing up, just less wrinkles. Now, we've all heard of the other different paths to enlightenment. You know them all. Service, suffering, devotion, poverty, silence, contemplation, and some people actually like to do the self-mortification one. Let's maltreat ourselves to the degree that we think we're spiritual. So I am proposing today is that we look at spiritual optimism not as an idea, but as a path, as a way of living, as a way out of the world's problems, completely and totally. If we could get everybody in the world to choose the spiritual path of optimism, all of the problems of the world would cease. They would. If everybody had believed that good pervades everything and that the world is perfect just the way it is, we wouldn't have any trouble. So we know in this room, right, that what we feel, see, know, that all the good of the universe is ours, right here, right now. Do you believe that? The good of the universe is yours, right here, right now. That's what Science of Mind, New Thought Philosophy teaches. That what you're doing when you make an alignment is aligning yourself with the truth that already exists in the universe. You're not creating something. You are aligning with what is. If I say that I am perfect, whole, and complete, that's not wishful thinking. That's an acknowledgement of the truth, of a spiritual truth. And when I grasp that spiritual truth, it makes me in line, in alignment with what's true in the universe. So, included in this spiritual path, the spiritual path of optimism, are these aspects: gratitude, thanksgiving, enthusiasm, cheerfulness, brightness, buoyancy, certainty, trust, easiness, encouragement, happiness, and hopefulness. Just a little side issue. They've done huge studies of what happens to people dependent on whether they're hopeful or hopeless. Okay? They did one study of over 10,000 people and discovered that hopeless people died at a 60% faster rate than hopeful people. So being hopeful is like another synonym, an aspect of optimism. So we know this is a perfect universe, and that the power of spirit is always good, only love, and therefore it is one with perfection. It is one with oneness. And you can't actually change that. You can only have a differing perspective or a different point of view, but you can't change the absolute perfection of the universe. It's just there. And once you can accept that, as I have, as I accept that this universe is absolutely perfect, all those cares, concerns, and worries about the conditions of the world take on a much different flavor. You look at them completely differently. You say to yourself, there's some interesting consciousness playing out. You don't think it's the end of the world. You think consciousness is playing out. So, at least to some degree, do you believe you are spiritually optimistic? Do you? How about a show of hands? Spiritually optimistic? Yay! All right. Okay. So how has what I'm considering optimism affected the world so far? So let's take a little bit of a look at history. Okay, if you listen to all the prophets of doom, the doom pundits, I call them, watch the news on TV, or read newspapers, you would naturally believe that everything is always getting worse, never better. And the reason for that is because, for some reason, good news doesn't sell. Is that weird or what? But it's the truth. Probably 1 out of every 100 articles you're going to see on television is going to be positive. And everything else is going to be pointing out a problem. And every time you're focused on the problem, you're focused in the wrong direction. Focus, what is it Einstein said? The mind that creates the problem can never create the solution. So don't focus on the problem. Ernest Holmes says, don't focus on external conditions. Drop them from your mind and focus on the truth. And that will become your experience of life. So Michael Crichton, or Crichton, I never can figure out what his name is called, wrote a novel called State of Fear. You might want to read that book. It's very interesting. His premise in that novel is that there is a continuous barrage of end-of-the-world stories to keep us in fear, and that they all fade away only to be replaced by a new impending disaster. Remember Y2K? All the planes were going to fall out of the sky because the programmers were too stupid to code in the right year. Damnedest thing. And I talked to people about it. I said, hey guys, this is nonsense. And they said, no, it's a real danger. Well, it was nonsense. Anyway, despite this harping on the problem rather than the solution, New Thought philosophy is beginning to grab the consciousness of the universe, consciousness of the world. I see it, even though people don't think they're thinking New Thought thoughts, they're in the consciousness of our society now. They're embedded. I'll give you a few. Abraham Lincoln said, a person can be just about as happy as they make up their mind to be. Okay, that's New Thought. Henry Ford said, if you think you can, or if you think you can't, you're right. New Thought. And over again, you'll hear people saying New Thought things they don't even realize are part of New Thought philosophy, but they are. So we can track the progress of the consciousness changes in the world through history. So let's start with air, clean air. First, the idea, clean air is our birthright. All humans deserve clean air. Now, these clean air ideas began when I was a teenager in the 50s. People started talking about air. You know why they started talking about air? Well, I lived in Southern California, and I lived in a beach town just south of Los Angeles, and you could see where LA started because it was brown. The air was actually brown. It was like the air was clear here, and 5 miles away, the air was brown. And people died from it all over the place. Now, today, we have tripled the number of drivers and cars on the road, and air pollution is way down. Polluting gases are down 73%, according to the Federal Highway Administration. So what happened? Consciousness. People started thinking about clean air. Car manufacturers started thinking about making cars that didn't pollute. Why? Because people wanted clean air. As we became aware and raised our consciousness, the air became cleaner. This is kind of like actual physical proof that expecting the good works. Okay? Now, we've recently become aware of the importance of forests, right? Forests are important. Okay? These ideas only started about 20, 25 years ago. Before that, nobody gave a shit about forests. Now we have begun to become aware of the need of forests. And for the last 30 years, forests in affluent countries are expanding. We still got to convince the Brazilians of that, but everybody else is doing better. In fact, in some places in the United States, there are more trees than there ever have been. Why is that? Because people plant trees. I planted on my property 100 redwoods. One of them today is 70 feet tall. 70 feet tall. I planted it in honor of the death of my oldest daughter. And so there it is. So let's look at water. When I first moved to the Bay Area, that was in the late 50s, early 60s, there were no bay shrimp. And the reason for that was because they were dumping sewage into the San Francisco Bay directly without cleaning it up. And so everything smelled awful, and you couldn't have any bay shrimp. Clear Lake, in those days, was dead. All the fish in the lake were floating belly up on the surface. Okay? When I moved to London in 1972, if you went near the Thames River, you had to keep your nose closed because it smelled so damn bad. All of those things no longer exist. You can go swimming in Clear Lake today. San Francisco Bay has bay shrimp, and the Thames is clean. You can swim in the Thames today. Why is that? What do you think the reason for that is? Ideas, attitudes. People said, we deserve clean water. How can we do that? And so as their consciousness changed, the world changed. The world changed. So consciousness is the single most powerful tool you can utilize to change anything. So all of that has now been completely reversed. We've begun consciousness, we have a consciousness of the sacredness of the planet. The ecology is now tremendously important. You'll see more and more things going forward that will help the economy and the ecology. So progress is our most important product as optimists. We lay claim to progress in the world once we have applied a new thought. Once we have come to the total internal acceptance that God is everything, it's all one and perfect, things will change. So Science of Mind has this motto on a magazine: change your thinking, change your life. But what they really mean is change your negative thinking to positive, optimistic thinking, and your life experiences will get better. As our final example of the external world, let's look at peace. In the years from 1900 through 1975, 122 million people at least died as a direct result of war. Probably another 50 million died from war's side effects. Poverty, pandemics, lack of food, and then the direct results of war, being killed in battle. So let's say 172 million people. And now from 1975 to the year 2026, we're looking at probably around 10 million people. Now that's substantial change, right? That's better than 90% improvement. Better. So you might think the peace idea is not grabbing hold, but it is. And the world as a result has changed. Yes, there are still problems, but then human beings are going to create problems because they all have different consciousness. And a different consciousness, there are a lot of people who believe war is a really good thing and let's kill each other. I can't stop them from believing that, but I can hope that this idea of peace will become so pervasive that eventually everyone will think peace. That's what we'll hope for. So it's apparent to me that the idea of being peaceful has resulted in more than a 90% reduction in the number of war-related casualties. And I attribute this dramatic change, this cause of progress, because we have the idea of peace in our minds and hearts. We sing that song, back in the old days, but peace begins with me. Let there be peace on earth. We want to know and be peaceful. And that's our opportunity as optimists to show how that peace positively works. So I'm optimistic about everything. But now we have this tremendous problem. We have to live the path of optimism. So a group of men, guys like my age, old, and they're sitting around and talking about how shitty the world is. And Charlie says, wait a minute, enough. He says, I have decided to become an optimist. And so the guys look at him and say, well, Charlie, why do you look so upset? This is not easy being an optimist. Yeah, I'm trying to tell you, it takes conscious effort to maintain optimism. You need a basic plan, some discipline. So this all starts with trust. Trust is a personal commitment to the truth that you believe in and know to the degree that you can relax into it. Okay. I know that Spirit loves me. I trust that. I know that I am the expression of Spirit. I trust that. I know that the universe is one, not many, and that there's no opposing force to good. I trust that. So to build trust, you have to get rid of the bombardment of negative input. I have no television reception. I ceased reading newspapers. I scan the headlines to see if there's anything really important that I need to know about. I have not read an article for probably the last 6 weeks. There's nothing I really need to know about. It sounds like it ought to be interesting and important to you, but most of the time, it's just fear-mongering. More and more and more of it. So because I don't have a TV, that's a lot of intravenous poison that does not enter my consciousness. Believe me, very little of TV is positive. I limit obsessively reading the newspaper. I stopped doing that completely. If you've been hanging out with what I called the wound-worshipping crowd, stop it. You have to make some decisions. You have to make conscious decisions to become, as much as possible, the consciousness you wish. And sometimes this involves letting go of old habits that don't serve us. So watch your thinking. When you notice victim thoughts or they're doing it to me thoughts, replace this with the truth that your consciousness is going to create your experience of life. And unfortunately, dumping negative thinking, as great as it is not enough. You have to move boldly forward. You have to develop positive, uplifting friendships. Yeah, you need support, especially if you're going to maintain optimism. You need a lot of support. Hang out with New Thought metaphysicians. Hang out with this group. A lot of people here are positive spiritual energies. Learn all you can about spiritual philosophy. I personally, what changed my life is my wife, the great scout, went out one evening with a friend of hers to a New Thought philosophy group in Lafayette, California, and she loved it so much, she dragged me along to the next one. Totally changed my life. Paradigm shifting event. For the first time in my life, the universe began to make sense. It began to make sense. So I encourage everyone to study New Thought philosophy. There are trillions of good and great authors. Emmett Fox, Charles Barker, Ernest Holmes. It's almost impossible to read Thomas Troward, but Thomas Troward is fantastic. Wonderful, wonderful ones. Norman Vincent Peale's New Thought philosopher in a strange kind of way, right? Anyway, all kinds of great reading. I would start with Emmett Fox. Easy, accessible, a lot of fun, and a brilliant thinker. I take classes. I have taken, I don't know, probably 100 classes in my lifetime, sometimes taking the same class more than once. I've taken the Thomas Troward classes at least twice, because it took me that long to figure out what he was talking about. Classes that teach the perfection of oneness and the power of love, which has no opposition, the perfect abundance that is already given. And my experience in classes has always been terrific. Receive and give, learn to do a spiritual alignment and receive them and give them to each other. Know the truth for each other. Sometimes we are consciously blocked from our truth because of some past experience or just a bad attitude, but the other person doesn't have that blockage. And so when you unite together for them to know the truth for you, that's an incredible upliftment and a gift, an incredible gift we can give each other. I align for people every day, without fail. It's one of the a morning ritual for me is to think of every friend I have that needs help and see them receiving a miracle, knowing the truth that God is on their side. Now, one of the benefits of being a spiritual optimist is you don't need to sit in the lotus position. It's not necessary. You don't need to kneel. You don't need to bow in any particular direction. You don't need to think or not think my version of how this works. Develop your own. And on this path, you don't have to give up one good thing. Not one. In fact, you always want to embrace good things. Accept them, make them yours. This discipline actually requires that you live in splendor and in beauty, surrounded by warmth and celebratory friends, continuously uplifted by life and love. Join me.